Hey, Richard.
Hi, Drew.
How are you?
Doing all right. Yeah, battling some allergies down here in New Mexico, but other than that, feeling good. I've spent
This is Richard. Richard got his PhD in geography and cartography from UW-Madison. He was a professor of cartography at the University of Kentucky, where he built an online digital mapping program called New Maps Plus. And Richard loves maps. The purpose of this call is because I wanted to ask Richard his thoughts on implementing the data set collected by Epist into a variety of maps and visualizations. Currently, the Epist MVP is not collecting any sort of location data or anything like that. But the actual production app will be able to collect location data mainly from mobile phones and associates that location data with user beliefs. Richard was very excited about the opportunity for maps in Epist, but what surprised me was how philosophical the conversation became. So in the following conversation, we're going to cover maps, visualizations, theories, and at the end, we're going to wrap it all up with Buddhist philosophy. Enjoy.
like I said, I've spent 15, 20 years as a cartographer making maps. Most of the time, I am dealing with data and representing phenomena that we can see. And one aspect that I like about Epist, and one I've learned more through your reports and stuff, is that this is an opportunity to try to map what is invisible, namely the potential structure that underlies human beliefs.
We kind of coined a term for that. We have called it mapping the belief genome. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it certainly resonated with me. I like the metaphoric play with the human genome and the DNA, right, which can not only describe the structure of traits and characteristics in a human, but can potentially start to explain why certain phenotypes take on certain attributes. The simplicity of the survey and technique in terms of the believe, disbelieve, and unsure is its power as well, right? Because we can collect a lot of data across a lot of data points, and it's having a three simple metrics there. Because we can tie that to the spatial location, it allows us to start to do some really interesting geographic cartographic analysis as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's start taking a look at it.
So started off with playing with what is sometimes referred to as a heat map. These are interpolated values between our specific data points. So this really allows us to see the hot spots within the data set across space. And we can play with different ways to visualize those.
So like on this slide right here on this scene, the dark red is basically more likely to believe a given belief, a given claim. They're more likely to believe that.
That's the way this is mapped currently. Okay. Yeah, strong beliefs are going to be darker red, and disbelief is white.
And then it looks like you got a little checkbox there.
Yes, just indicating that these data are drawn from the specific geographic coordinates. Yeah, and then for absolute values, raw values, we're often going to want to map using a different cartographic technique, is proportional symbols. So these allow us to map the size of this icon, or in this case, just a circle. We can map that size directly to the raw count. So this is a good way to see exactly where people are believing a certain belief. This is a good one for us to look at the Chropleth, actually. The danger with the Chropleth map sometimes is if you have a big area-wise county on the map that has a certain color encoded onto it, it can really draw the eye and make the user believe that, oh, something big has happened here, where maybe it's just a giant county or something in Wyoming or Nevada with like 4 people in it. So it can it can provide undue weight in terms of the visual argument that a map's trying to make. So the proportional symbol maps can be a little more honest in ways.
I love the terminology, the visual argument that the map is trying to make, because that really is what is happening, right? Like the map is obviously communicating something, or there wouldn't be any purpose for it. So there's a visual argument that the map is trying to make. So some of them are more honest than others. That's a really good description of like your map choice.
Yeah, I mean, cartography is often described as the art and science of map making, and that artistic element allows us to do a lot with maps. And to be quite frank, we can lie with maps, and we've seen this time and time again throughout history. And in a sense, it's kind of impossible to make a completely honest map. These are always representations of data and abstractions of reality, often thought of as propositions about the way that we want to see the world. But as cartographers and data scientists, we can be aware of this, and we can try to make these maps as honest as we can. And this is where one element, which we might get to a little bit later, about the Epist project and this mapping project, is the idea that we're owning uncertainty in the data from the beginning. Usually cartographers and data scientists just kind of like to sweep that uncertainty to the side, and we can present something very convincing. But because we're acknowledging it, and when we look at a final mapping project or output, we can actually visually encode where the uncertainty is in a data set. And that also tells us a lot.
Yeah.
We also explored the use of the Hexbin cartographic technique, which this is a technique that has gained popularity in recent years. So it's already kind of familiar to a lot of users and becoming more visually appealing. But it really solves a long-standing problem in mapping and geography called the modifiable area unit problem. This is the MAUP, M-A-U-P. So the hex binning is a way to create equal areas across space so we can actually make comparisons between these units.
What does the size of the hex represent?
So it's divorcing the units from the physical geography on the ground a little bit. We're abstracting this. Obviously, we live in counties with irregular shapes, and we live in points, locations ourselves, and these big hex bins don't exist. So this is a cartographic representation technique, so we can compare these units without defaulting back to the different county sizes. So in this case, the hex size is aggregating a number of points.
So the colors, in this case, I don't know, what do the colors represent?
So in this case, we are encoding the hexagon with color based off of the majority opinion.
Yeah, and if any given claim or belief could have any number of maps, and then as we start to cross-reference beliefs, like the number of possible visualizations is practically infinite, especially as the number of claims and beliefs approaches infinity. It definitely is infinite. I guess my point being is that there's no question that there's going to be circumstances where the maps appear to lie, or there's something that isn't what it seems to be and is worth investigating. And I think my general philosophy on that as a platform is just that if we put it out there, and we put it out there with the data, everyone understands the sort of data collection methods, like people are signing up for the app, people are taking positions on these beliefs, then we allow the users and the marketplace of ideas to sort of speculate on what these outcomes mean. And that's where it gets really interesting. As a company, we aren't necessarily taking any positions on what these outcomes mean. Like, we are just collecting and providing the data, and then as users and individuals, people can try to understand what the outcomes mean, and that, I think, is where it'll get fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's one of the exciting things that I like about this project and how you've conceived of it, and the data that we're testing with for these initial prototypes, but then the eventual data, the real data that we'll get from people, is that the aim of this seems to be more diagnostic and less therapeutic, right? We're able to take a look at the data and filter it in certain ways, or map it and look at the distribution across space, and we can describe what the beliefs are. And then as we move forward with this project, we're able to understand that underlying structure to, again, try to understand the why. But we're not trying to fix anyone's belief, or it's not trying to persuade or show anyone that they're wrong, right? We're really trying to understand how the beliefs get structured and supported and how they relate to each other. And then if there's any kind of spatial signature to that as well. So we're exploring that through these maps and these interfaces. And we can go in not knowing the answer ourselves and be surprised by certain patterns and explore that. We can also provide this for the end users. So one set of maps may describe and explain things very explicitly for the user. We want you to believe X, Y, and Z, or here's the fastest route to get from A to B. This isn't that kind of a map. This map is going to offer the opportunity for the users to actually explore the data themselves. And we can do this through a number of techniques, using a user interface and allowing them to change parameters, obviously looking at different claims and beliefs, and inviting them through interaction and interactive maps, which is an amazing tool and technology that we've only run across in recent decades. But by giving the users those kind of tools, they can explore the data themselves and kind of start to come to their own conclusions. Yeah, I'm really excited to get into these mobile maps. These are ones we've spent a little bit more time on recently.
Country-based.
Yes. I wonder if there's a better country. Yeah.
Well, we also have, so this is the country one. We also have states, right?
Yeah. I wonder if we should jump to the states.
Yeah. So this is about whether or not the Electoral College should be abolished in favor of popular vote. So, and this is AI generated data, so we shouldn't take too much from it. But if this were, real data, what we could say from this is that California believes more strongly about that the Electoral College should be abolished than any of these states in red. Texas seems to be, which are a lot of southern states and middle America state, but Texas seems to be sort of on the fence here. Florida also on the fence in the sort of unsure category.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but designing the map this way, I'm essentially asking the user to walk away with this conclusion that California largely believes that this claim is the case. Texas is on the fence, and New Mexico does not believe that the Electoral College should be abolished. And then through interaction, we can begin to drill down and be a little bit more specific. So here we can say, yeah, the majority of the beliefs within California agree with this one. And here we can see a little bit more of a breakdown of how that actually works. So again, the cartographic technique and approach is to start off with kind of high level overview, and then allow the user to kind of go down and get more specifics.
And that is really achievable through, modern user interface technology.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can totally deliver this on an iPhone.
Yeah, we've had 25 years now of applying usability engineering techniques to mapping and cartography. So these are basic web design principles, but they're also physical design of physical environment principles, right? Offering the user an affordance letting them know where they can click, how they can dive in and use the map differently.
Look at the county
It's
map
here.
on this map type. Do we have this map type on the county?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's look at this one now. The same claim, investigating this electoral college question.
Okay, so this is the electoral college question, but on the county level map.
Yeah, and so we can see we have some gray counties with no data there, but for the majority of the counties, we do have data. We were kind of inventing new cartographic techniques here. So every time we zoom in, it's taking all of the counties in the context within this particular window, recalculating that distribution of values, and then reestablishing our buckets of colors that we're basically assigning to each one.
So the green boxes, the green counties are always the most likely to believe within the viewable window. The red counties are always the least likely to believe within that viewable window.
So it's a little bit of a popcorn effect here because of the nature of the synthetic data. Part of the performance hit right now, I think, is that every time I'm zooming the map, it's probably taking all 4,300 US counties and recalculating all those values within it. So that could probably be done a little bit differently. But.
Yeah, certainly.
So there's another experimental technique that I had introduced here. I'm not sure we had talked about it or if I had shared it with you yet, but I was playing with this idea that we can do an analysis of all the counties and find ones that are very similar in these beliefs. So by clicking this, we can see, so people in this county, if they want to know, well, where in the United States are people who believe like I do. So this is kind of a different idea of a neighbor, right?
Yeah.
And so not, while it is true that a lot of phenomena has a nearest neighbor effect, that the neighbors in the county over from me are probably going to maybe believe the way I do. It's interesting to kind of explore how this idea of similar views can stretch across space and time.
Wow. So Richard, this is a pretty incredible framework, because if you take geography out of it, let's say we identify a certain set of beliefs and there are some observable phenomena in a particular region. What could we call these neighbors? Something neighbors, sort of like ideological neighbors. What do you think of that term, Richard?
Yeah, I like that one.
So let's say we find an ideological neighbor across the country or a few states over, then we can pose the hypothesis that some observable phenomena in one area are caused by this particular set of ideologies, and the validation of that hypothesis could be to see whether those same phenomena existed in the ideological neighbors. That's a pretty fascinating concept. I like that.
Yeah, and it's very appropriate for the 20th century here, right? Because we know how ideas used to spread in the 1800s, and it was very much still bound to geography. Now we've got the internet, and we've got the circulation of ideas happening in these other virtual spaces, for lack of a term. This is a way to actually ground some of that virtual connection and understanding in lived geographies, because these are, in fact, real places where people inhabit and they share ideas with people across the country.
Yeah, and we don't have to identify the actual underlying mechanisms, but there are mechanisms that are actually really primitive, like Facebook groups, YouTube channels that people follow, so that the type of idea that comes out in one neighborhood here for an ideological neighbor that essentially follows those same mechanisms, like they're getting that same information as if they were geographic neighbors in the 1800s.
Yeah, absolutely. And the power of the data set, this for me as a data scientist is one data point, one curiosity, one claim here. So I can, it's already kind of wanting me to explore more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need more data. We need more data.
Well, yeah. So I can say, given this claim, these are all ideological neighbors. How do these neighbors compare if we introduce some other claims, right? So it'll introduce some more analysis there, but
Right.
it's one place to start. Yeah. And again, not wanting to go into this looking to prove our own suspicions, right? It's an empirical question, and one we can investigate through your database and the data sets that's emerging and these tools we're building to interface with that data set.
100%. The platform will always be sort of agnostic to the conclusions, never try to prove anything. But the users will often be trying to prove things, and that's fine, and that's almost part of the fun of it. Like, part of the process is the whole goal is to supercharge the marketplace of ideas. But if the platform can just simply provide a tool set that everybody can use, then that is the point. Like, we can supercharge the marketplace of ideas. The stronger ideas and points will live, not necessarily on the platform, but in the conclusions of all of the users as they evaluate all the possibilities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in that way, this project is continuing with a project that started in the 1980s that is generally captured under this umbrella notion of the democratization of cartography, right? And it kind of started with crowdsourcing some data sets, and we can pull in the data that's generated through people's phones and everything now. But in that sense, what you're saying is we're continuing to kind of put invite the users to make their own conclusions and inferences about the data itself, rather than just simply supplying the data. We've moved them with this product more into the interpretation and analysis of the map zone.
Right. And I think the experts will certainly be, experts become influencers. And we see this across all kinds of different disciplines. And so your label doesn't quite count for as much, but your expertise counts for everything, because the users and the viewers in the audience ultimately determine and decipher who the experts are and who the influencers are. It's not a perfect process, but neither is the credentialing system. Like, there are no perfect processes, and it's certainly a process that I think by us adding these tools to the marketplace, that it'll benefit everybody to be able to engage in this understanding.
I believe so. Yeah. I was going to show you this one thing. This Moran's eye is a classic cartographic technique. It measures spatial autocorrelation. So this is a principal geographic concept that things that are close to us tend to be more similar to us than things that are far away. So this is a way to quantify that relationship. Moran's eye, spatial autocorrelation, just as an example of what we could do. We could take like two different beliefs. So prayer has a measurable impact on personal well-being. We can see that has a high correlation, that statement. So if we were looking at the map of that, the clustering of people with like beliefs would be physically, geographically close to each other, where another belief, such as free will, is an illusion determined by biology and environment. That one doesn't seem to have a high level of correlation. So that one's not really spatially dependent. These are the beliefs that have a very high correlation spatially in real geographies up here. So healthcare should be free for everyone. Hell is a literal place. So these are the ones that have that very high correlation.
What was the number one there?
Free? Yeah.
Or prayer has a measurable impact.
Right. So yeah, running that Moran's eye on this data set and then ranking all of these. So these are all a little bit less. And then we've got some that just don't really seem to correlate at all. And then we've got some that down here which will be the negative correlation. So these are the ones that really don't seem to have any kind of correlation. So yeah,
the ones that are green, the ones that have greater positive values.
Yep.
That basically means that they have the highest one. That means that the neighboring node has the highest probability of sharing that position.
Right.
Uh, what I'm wondering, I don't know how it works. You'd have to really get into the math. But a negative value, does that mean that it's almost like those, if you have a position, then the nodes next to you are less likely to have that position? In other words, like, if you disbelieve, if you don't have that position, then it's more likely that the neighbor does have that position.
It- exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yep. Yeah. You know, it's again, it's what we yeah, it's what we can do when we spatialize this data set, right? Because we've got Gallup polls that measure a lot of opinions and things like that, but they don't bring it down to the geographic specificity
Hmm.
that we can do a lot of these kind of analysis with. But yeah, this will basically say if it's any of these values, you know, if I believe this value is the case, there's little confidence that my neighbors may also believe that.
Right.
We're up here in these. If I believe something, my neighbor, you know, my household believes something, it's very likely that the neighbors are also going to believe that.
Yeah, this is mapping the belief genome, like looking at these outcomes and these sort of different frameworks for understanding the relationship between beliefs is awesome. And it's like impossible to predict what kinds of benefits will be produced from the fundamental building blocks. Like one principle that I've recently started to understand is how sophisticated the outcomes can be from very primitive building blocks.
Yes, right.
The inventors of chess or a deck of cards could have never conceived of all of the different implementations, all of the books, all of the outcomes, all of the events, all of the organizations like that would spawn over the simple principles that they encapsulated. And I think that map is encouraging that, like, yeah, we can produce really insightful data once we collect the primitive data. We can look at it in these more sophisticated ways.
Absolutely. And yeah. When we write or to think or talk more about this, I want to try to revisit this genome analogy, and
Uh-huh.
starting with these three primitives like you have is really powerful in ways that I'm still trying to think it through and articulate. Something that just occurred to me, or maybe it did before and I forgot, but it just occurred to me again. I don't know how much Buddhism you've ever studied, or like,
I don't know
I,
much, but tell me.
yeah, so I practice the Vipassana meditation, or the insight meditation, and the fundamental teaching that underlies this has to do with what's known in Pali as Vedana, or the feeling tone of any sense. So our eyes, ears, nose, you know, thoughts even.
Okay.
And the Buddha maintained that it's the fundamental source of any kind of reaction or response we have. And at the very fundamental level, for any kind of sensory input, we have the response of either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. There's just those three. They're the same ones as that you're mapping, right? And from there, the Buddha maintained that's where we build our reactions to everything. Ooh, pleasant. Ooh, unpleasant. Ooh, neutral. Unsure, somewhere in the middle, right? And that builds up our habits, our beliefs, the whole work. So it's kind of an interesting parallel. I think
Richard,
more.
I had no idea that we were building Epist on a Buddhist framework. Now I'm reconsidering everything I know about myself. I never considered myself a Buddhist, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm glad that you brought that to my attention.
Oh yeah.
So
No,
the
I mean,
Buddha operated on three primitives. That is so cool.
yep. Yep. And that's what, you know, to free yourself of all suffering, you spend time just paying attention to those three primitives and seeing when they arise and when they pass away and stuff. So
So, is there in Buddhism, is there any obligation to be in one of those three positions or not?
no, I
No.
mean, you're observing it,
So
right?
just like on Epis, there's no
Yep.
obligation to have any one of those positions. You just are one.
Yeah, yeah. You don't need to take it personally. The fact that the enchiladas smell good or
Yeah.
that dog barking is annoying. You don't have to like personally take it and judge it. It's just you can recognize that there's that initial primitive of like, it's basically, are you moving towards something or are you moving away from something, right? And so for your map, it's like the approve of that claim could be seen as like oh, I like that, I'm going to kind of move toward it and grasp and hold on to it. Where if it's a claim that I disagree with, it's a pushing away from, right?
Okay.
And then in Buddhism, the unsure, that third category, is sometimes kind of also referred to as a little bit of a delusional state. Like you probably do disagree or agree with a claim. The uncertainty has to do with not seeing clearly, maybe, or just still being influenced by emotional reactions, where at least, in Buddhism, if you can sit clearly, you do have a reaction to everything. You're either moving away from it or
So in
grasping it.
in a thinking about your beliefs or epistemology of like technical beliefs, when you say you're unsure, it usually means you don't have enough information. But in Buddhist reflection, if you're in that middle state, that information that you're missing might be more internal. It's like you're not
Right.
clear about where you're at on that.
Yeah, exactly. Or, it's or the true signal's there. It's just so subtle. But if there's too much noise going on or your mind's fluctuating too much, you're not going to be able to pick up that subtlety. So
Yeah.
if you can, and so there's all sorts of little parallels we could draw between like a strong political belief, right? It's hard if I'm presented with a claim, it's hard for me to kind of objectively evaluate whether I believe that claim or not when it's surrounded by a bunch of political noise and anger and it's tied to all sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
So if I can kind of take some time to separate that claim from the flag waving or whatever else is being surrounded with, then maybe I'll be like, oh, I actually like, why do I believe in this? And then this is getting more into your methodology, right? What's the supporting evidence I have for that claim? To be able to think clearly like that would require calming down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I talked about yesterday at the startup event was the purpose of Epist is to isolate the signal from the noise, and the noise on other social media when you're trying to use it as the marketplace of ideas. The noise is people just throwing rhetorical devices at you, name calling, persuasion, and and to your point on taking a position of a claim like in peace, you have to get the noise out, and then when you can just see the claim and you know that you're just taking a position on the claim and there's no room for noise, there's no way for other people to inject noise. The only thing other people can do is recognize your position and take their own position. That's it.
Yep. Yeah, no, exactly. So yeah, you're onto something here, and it's a 2600 year.
Well, Richard, I thought we were going to talk about maps, but we ended up talking about Buddhism, and I loved both parts of the conversation. So, thanks for talking to me.
Absolutely. Well, I love cartography, and I love studying the Satipatthana, the foundations of mindfulness, because they do. Looks like they've found some connection here with your projects.
Awesome.
That's great. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, Richard. Good to see you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you too.
Bye.
We'll talk soon. Okay. See you, Drew.